you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can watch the vApe team.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, that was a little creepy, but welcome to this episode of the vApe team. My name is Brian. I have a YouTube channel, The Vapor Chronicles, and we have a sweet treat here tonight for you guys. Our tempers or our temperatures might be variable, but we are going to have a great show. Tonight we have a special guest who is actually going to be a regular, so I'm not even going to call him a guest anymore. David Jaquith is with us once again, and he is going to share his amazing knowledge base and his experience working with temperature control. Tonight we're going to talk about DNAs, ZNAs, we're going to talk about SX Mini M classes, we're going to talk about probably IPv4s, which none of us have. We're going to go into all things temp control, pre-made temp coils, builds, different tanks, heat coefficiency. We have all kinds of stuff. We've been chatting back and forth all week trying to organize a great show for you guys. But first, let's talk about what we're vaping and introduce everyone. So first I'm going to introduce our special guest. David, welcome.
Hey man, how's it going?
What up, what up?
Yeah, we're ready. Limode and SX'd.
And what kind of juice you vaping on there?
Today I'm doing Charlie Noble. I'm doing their pistachio, and then they've got another one, Silo Point.
Oh, Solar Point, yeah.
Solar's Point. Cursive, can't read it, sorry.
Sweet.
It's really good.
All there's art on all the juice bottles, you can't even read half of it.
Well, old age, man.
Save the art, man, come on.
Okay, I'll stick with that.
How about you, BK? What is up, my brotherhood? Nice kooky.
What's happening there, my uptight brother? You got the SX Mini M class, just like everyone else here. The Sub-Tank Mini RBA section. I have it's like a .057 nickel build in here, 2.5 millimeter, like 4 or 5 wraps. And I'm vaping on some GWB by Steel Vapor, and it's just it's like a Fruit Loops type of vape. And this is just plain delicious.
I guess we're ready for me.
Well, I was letting BK hit that shit before we introduced you for you, Mike. But go ahead.
I always get interrupted when I'm hitting that shit.
Snap, buddy.
What's up, peeps? Hashtag hit that shit. SX Mini M class with the Limo nickel build with some Lupe. What's going on, guys?
Well, I'm going to be original, and I am vaping on an M class also, and I have a Kanger Sub-Tank Mini with a OCC coil in it that I'm trying out. I just put it in 5 minutes before the show started, so it's freshly wicked, wet, and ready. And I also have the milk, again, because I'm addicted to it. It should be called the crack, because it's like crack for me. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Welcome, David. Welcome, BK. Welcome, Mike. Welcome to all of you guys watching us live. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. But we have to stay a little bit on task, or at least attempt to, because we have some pretty important things. I know a lot of you guys are sort of either A, purchasing temp control mods, or B, interested in maybe finding more out about it. So I figured we'd have a show dedicated to our experiences, because, by the way, none of us are experts except for David. But none of us are experts. I think that we have enough experience, at least I do, with the good, the bad, and the ugly with temperature control to share some experience and help you guys maybe. And maybe we have a feed right here. You guys can help us too. So that's what I'm all about, and hopefully you guys get something out of this. So why don't we do this? Why don't we start, just to keep this organized, with, we'll start with you, David. David, what was your first experience with temperature control? And what was it like? How has it been since then? And talk about just some stuff. And we're going to have an open discussion tonight. So give us it.
Well, the first thing I did is I bought originally one of the Hannas that had a single battery. And besides that, the problem that I had is trying to find the right coil. I mean, I tried and I tried and tried. And then I thought, well, I was doing something wrong because I was doing this preheat thing. And then I think Robert Ellis came out and said to everybody, hey, look, I hate preheat. and I'm to the point where I would totally agree with that. That's one of the big faults, in my opinion, about DNA40. It would be wonderful if you could turn that off, but the problem is this: you can't, and you can't change the firmware. You're kind of stuck in a rut with it. And the reason I mentioned about the battery, one of the things that you'll find out in short order if you go to temperature controls, it's a battery hog. It does take up a lot of power. People say that it's not putting out a lot of heat, and they're dead wrong with that. I mean, you can get a very hot vape. You can get a burn your mouth kind of vape if you want to, if that's your thing, or you can get it very cool if that's your thing as well. I think over the period of time, the thing that I've come to discover with temperature control in general is it's in its infancy. It doesn't make a difference what device you've got. Even the SX, it's good, but we'll discuss it later that there still is a lot of technology that needs to go behind trying to make these a little bit more simple for everybody. I think we had a discussion earlier today that I was all over the place. I think I'm on my 7th or 8th coil to try to get the temperature control to work right on my SX Mini, thinking it was the SX Mini. Oh, I was wrong about that, and we'll talk about that as well. Temperature control, the big thing that pulls everybody to it is that you don't have to worry about dry hits. You don't have to worry about if you're running low on juice and burning up your cotton, or some god-awful taste that's going to happen in between process with if you've got a battery that's inconsistency. I guess that's the way to say it. I was going to go long and about, but I think consistency is the big thing about temperature control. It's almost to the point where I guess some people would almost call it boring, but it's boring in a good way. Anyway, those are my thoughts with it.
We were chatting before we started about, the future of temperature control, because this is sort of like we're just scratching the surface about what we're capable of achieving with better battery, charge ability, or the length that we have battery life in our batteries. And my mouth is not working for some reason, but I think that the graphic user interface of, like when I press this, okay, this crazy screen of joules and watts and voltage, and I'm a pretty tech-savvy guy, and it's complicated for me. And I do this a lot, and this is a hobby, and it's also a passion of mine. So if it takes me tons of time to do builds and to get it right and still not have an acceptable vape all the time, I don't know how it must be for the average user that just wants to vape and quit smoking cigarettes. So as fun as this is, it's not ready for prime time, and it's not simple yet. And everyone talks about closed systems. Well, closed systems have a lot of downfalls, and I'm not for them. But the one thing about closed systems, and it's sort of like the way I feel about PCs that come, like Apple has devices that run one OS, all the software is made for the hardware that's out there. It simplifies things, and it just works. And we're not at the point now that I believe that temperature control nor Canthal. I think there's a lot of improvement that needs to be done on all fronts. How do you feel about that, BK?
Well, I think you're right. For the average user, I think things need to be dumbed down, simplified, and Apple-fied, so to speak. For me as an enthusiast, selfishly, I hope that doesn't happen in the back of my mind, because this is what's fun about this hobby for me, and this is why it's become a hobby. To be honest, if this wasn't a hobby for me, I would have quit vaping already. Because I'm to the point I don't need the nicotine. I mean, even the habit of just doing it isn't really. I do it a lot, but it's because I enjoy it, not because I'm addicted to it. You know what I mean? And I like it. But moving back onto your original question, I think I think it has to go. I think it has a ways to go. I feel like I kind of figured out the M class really well, like in the last day. To the point where I personally can get a good consistent vape off of it. But I was banging my head against the wall for the first 2 days until the light bulb went off in my head and I figured it out. And I have an engineering background. To a lot of people out there, I'm just a drunken vaping beer, but no, I do have an engineering background. I'm good at math. I'm a hands-on type of guy, and I think about these kind of things, and I think about them hard, and I figure things out. But the average person just wants to fucking vape. you know, and I think a lot of them are going to be turned off, and I don't think a lot of them are going to come into temperature control until, as you say, it's a closed container type of system, or a closed system at least, or it's sold as a match system. Like, say you can buy the Kanger K-Box, okay, and it's set up for their heads, and there's a small window of adjustment in there, and that's it, and it works.
I completely
Those are my
agree.
thoughts.
Yeah, I think that there should always be sort of like the next level of the new innovative stuff for the enthusiasts and people that like to figure stuff out and get hands-on. But I think there needs to be some, and probably this is the trickle-down effect that we're going to see with all this technology. You know, the more this becomes affordable, the more they start nailing the performance of these chips. And we're going to speak about this in a little bit. They need to come up with a better, at least a better coiling method than the nickel, because my nickel experiences have not been the greatest so far. But I think that as time passes, we're going to have the price come down, it'll be available in cheaper devices, and the graphic user interfaces are going to get more and more advanced. I mean, if you look at the screens that were on mods from a year ago, they've gotten a lot better, and it's only going to continue, okay? Especially as more money and resources get put into you know, research and development, because that's where it all starts, you know, and then it trickles down from there. So what about you, Mike? What's your experience with nickel and temp?
To tell you the truth, I really didn't. The DNA devices that turned me off. The only time it really worked for me was using an RDA. Using tanks, I didn't have a good experience. And ever since I had this in my hand, it's been working flawlessly. I understand it. I don't have problems doing nickel builds. For me, they're very simple. But I don't know. It's been working great. I have no complaints right now.
You know, in our comments section, Lex Luger just posted, "It's just the nickel that's kind of fickle."
I would agree with that.
What do you think about that, David?
Yeah.
Hey.
I think that I don't know how to really put in a whole bunch of real simple words. The problem with nickel is that it's so hard for people. I think this is probably the first thing. It's hard for people to gauge because they've got Canthal in their mind and how the Canthal system works. And gee whiz, I need to have bigger gauge and bigger this, and my coils need to be tightly put together. And so they build everything on their nickel builds the same way as that they would on their Canthal builds. And the problem is they're completely different. You know, when you get those janky pre-done coils where they're all been pulled apart and they look like springs, you're like, oh my God, that's horrible. It's the most. Let me tell you this: that's probably the perfect nickel build, the way it is with the spacing. We were discussing this earlier that you get oftentimes you'll get hot spots on the nickel itself because the resistance closes off by and changes how the wires themselves touch one another. I know a lot of people don't have that problem initially, but the problem is, over a period of time, you're going to have the problem. And at some point, you're going to get a hot spot. And I'm not talking about a hot spot in the sense that you're burning your cotton. I'm talking about a hot spot in the sense where you're actually burning the juice on top of the coil itself. Because I was having that chronically initially with my Limo V2. The first tank, I had absolutely no problem with it. But that was right after I cleaned and purchased the tank. But then after about, I hate to admit this, but I think I'm on my 7th, maybe my 8th build, and I just got both of these in yesterday at 5 o'clock. So, literally, I was making a career out of rebuilding this until I finally got it right. The coils in general, they do need to be pulled apart. They need to be wider than what you're used to. The idea of gee whiz, I want to have so much power and, you know, to make my coils a little bit tighter, and how you do your cotton, everything's completely different about how you would do nickel. And I think since it's so different than what people are used to, that's why it's getting so frustrating for people in the process.
Wow. We're going to talk a little bit more in a bit about the different methods of doing builds with nickel. We're going to talk about twisting nickel. We're going to talk about the spacing with your nickel. We're going to talk about tempered nickel versus standard nickel. We're also going to talk about, obviously time permitting, and we're also going to talk about wrapping nickel and twisting it with Canthal and our experiences with that. But before I continue, I just wanted to share, you know, I've had an issue with, in my Limo 2 and also in my other devices, with nickel being great for the first day, great for the second day, and all of a sudden it starts tasting less flavorful, and then it starts tasting poor, and the vapor production is not as good. Now, I have to say that the M class, for me, so far, has been a much better vaping experience with temperature control than my DNA 40 vape, than my Vapor Shark and my Flask. At the same time, it's allowing me to get more vapor production without hitting the temperature protection limits. But when I open up my tank and I look at the coil, the cotton's fine, but the coil itself has this residue that's built up on it. And David and I were chatting earlier about, and also Mike and I, and I think BK and I talked too, we've been talking all week about it, is that it would be nice if the nickel had like Teflon or something on it so that it wouldn't, you know, have juice that gets cooked on there. It seems like it attracts the juice more to the coil itself, and it's sort of cooking it. And I don't know, man. How about you, BK? You have experience with that? I know it's been a few days.
Excuse me. Honestly, I think what you're experiencing has a lot more to do with wicking than anything. Surprise, surprise, I'm the guy bringing that up. I noticed that today. I re-wicked 3 times, okay? The one time, I wicked it how I normally wick, okay, and it was fantastic. The second time, I said, fuck it, it's temperature control. I don't have to worry about the wicking. I just threw a wick in there, snipped it, threw it in. It was good for like an hour, and then the flavor just started to progressively drop off. Bad, okay? So I got pissed off. I pulled it back out. Now, I didn't go as nuts as I normally do on like a Canthal build with the wicking, but I paid attention to it. I made sure it was laid in there properly. I made sure it was fluffy. I combed it out a little bit. And this is back to frickin' awesome. And to be honest with you, this coil has that residue all over it. Because this is the same coil I've been using all day. And I've put like 30 milliliters through this today, just fucking around with it. I actually did pick up a bottle of 0 milligram just because I was chain vaping this thing, trying to figure it out. And yeah, I think wicking has more to do with it than you think.
Well,
and I think it's simple. The key is to keep the coiling as simple as possible, because when you start to overcomplicate your coils with this stuff, I don't think the temperature reading becomes very true anymore. That's all I got.
Well, one of the things that where we're talking about the gunk, this is just my, thoughts about it. It's sort of like a wire. Initially started out the wire has absolutely no insulation to it at all. So whatever temperature it has on it is going to be translated to the wick, and in turn heating your PG, your juice up. And as that gunk starts forming, the problem is that what temperature the wire itself is at is a constant. It's fine. That's not the problem. It's its ability to transmit the temperature of the wire that's being insulated now with your gunk, whatever you want to call it, to your juice. And I think that's one of the reasons that the drop off is such a problem potentially with nickel builds.
So
as one problem.
Mr. Wick Wizard, BK, how come when I do my Canthal builds with the same wicking methods that I've learned from the great one, which is you, how come I don't have that same problem with that wire?
Because it heats up at a much more rapid rate. Okay? So you're vaporizing much more juice faster.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas this, it's constantly throttling. So you're not getting that out-of-control heat exchange that's just, almost, what's the word I'm looking for here? It vaporizes more exponentially with the Canthal. This, it's throttled, okay?
Right. Mike, do you have any issues with gunking up or flavor problems with your nickel builds?
Yeah, always. It always happens after like 2 or 3 days.
Now, how do you feel about that? I mean, is that acceptable to you?
No. I'll just keep it short and easy for you. Not probably going to get interrupted again. No.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, there you have it, guys. Mike is saying no.
No.
Mike is grumpy cat today.
No, he's not. We love Mike, and he's good.
He's grumpy, and I'm Mr. Sleepy today, I think.
Huh. Anyway, so let's talk about do you guys have a preference of the best nickel build that you've done so far, and what device do you like to use it on of all your temperature control mods?
Well, I can pretty much tell you the standard for temperature control is Kfun. Not the Kfun V4. The Kfun V. Well, let's put it this way. I don't have the authentic Kfun V4 with the new gold spring that helps with resistance, but the Kfun Light Plus by far is probably the most consistent DNA 40 RTA that you can possibly buy. I don't have the drop-offs like I do with some of the other tanks. I don't have the connectivity issues. I don't have the temperature spiking issues. It's more of a connectivity thing. I'm not the first to say it. And see, even like with RDAs or RTAs, it doesn't really make a difference. If between your center post to your on your 510 to your positive to your wires, that has to be absolutely consistent connectivity. Any fluctuations that you're going to get there, whether it be through heat or whatever, is going to throw off the resistance, and a slight, tiny little resistance change is going to throw off your temperature control. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people have problems with different devices and how they'll work. But by far, the Kfun is probably your best bet so far.
How about the Limo 2, David?
Well, my initial problems that I had with the Limo 2, originally I was thinking that the SX Mini was broken. I was like, wow, what's going on with this temperature control? Initially, I started out with my Twisted 30, which is the Kanthal, and then also with the nickel, and it was working flawlessly. Actually, the first tank was great, and then all of a sudden I started filling up the tank, and about a quarter of the way through it, all of a sudden I was getting a burnt hit. And the short version of it is, after 7 or 8 builds, it came to the conclusion. It's the same thing with this Limo V2 as it is with this Limo V1. Don't get me wrong, I love the devices. There's nothing in that regard. But the problem is on both of them, it's the same design. The base comes off, and what you're left with is the positive post that goes through the middle of the tank down to the bottom base that screws on, and you've got that connection between the two of them. And the problem that you want to with both of the Limos is you'll get condensation at some point underneath your deck, and it just takes a tiny little bit of capillary action for some of the juice to start seeping its way in there. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not as bad as the V1. We'll talk about that in a second. But nonetheless, it's throwing off the resistance. Temperature control is very temperamental when it comes down to not only the resistance of your wire, but also, most importantly, the resistance of your addy itself.
Let me ask you this: do you think that people have the patience or the desire to even want to fucking deal with this? I mean, because it's just overwhelming for a lot of people, and we just want to vape and enjoy it. Do you think that there's a future for it? Do you think it can be improved? And this question is not just to you, David. This is to everyone. Are we even interested anymore? I guess that's the real question.
Until we get off of nickel, I think that we're going to have the same problems no matter what you do. You know, what I was praying for, and hopefully maybe, I don't have any idea, I don't have any inside scoop on Yeehee what they're going to do. If they can do titanium, I know that there's one company out there, it's VIR by GG, that's doing titanium. They may be having problems with it only from the standpoint that it's been 3 years in development, I still haven't seen it on the marketplace. I think this, though, if you don't mind Kfuns, I can assure you this: if you get an authentic Kfun, not trying to sell Kfuns either, if you get an authentic Kfun, you're not going to have some of these issues that you're getting with the connectivity and the resistance drop-off coming from your addy itself. Now, or people are going to want to get on board with that. The problem is this: is that I can't just throw in this build and just can't throw in this build and this, the list goes on, and just pull any tank and toss it on a temperature control and it's going to work, because it's not. Canthal's not supported. Very few tanks have gotten to the point, Kangaroo's come to the point of, that they're doing nickel, and a couple others have done the same thing where they've got pre-built coils. Well, the problem is with those pre-built coils, I've heard, sometimes they're great and sometimes they're bad. So until there's a consistency that we're all wanting to find, I think that temperature control is going to be, for the few. They're willing to put up with it. Let's put it that way. I mean, I'm going to sound like a bummer about it, because the thing is this: we're talking about all this negative stuff. I mean, I'm I'm loving this device. I mean, there's a few little things that I'd love to see a little bit different with it, but when it comes down to it, it's a big improvement over the Evolve's DNA 40, no doubt. The number one thing is that initial surge in power. You don't have it, and what power settings there are, at least you can set them. You can set them to soft all the way up to powerful plus and everywhere in between. You've got 4 settings, which is fantastic. It's a huge improvement over the DNA 40 in that regard.
By the way, sorry about that, guys. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty with the connection for some reason. It dropped out for a minute, but we're back, and I think we recorded most of you, David. At least your voice was going still. I got an error on my screen. So there's problems with our connections, just like there's problems with nickel.
Well, see, unless you have the perfect connection, you're going to have a pretty bad image, and the same thing comes down to as far as your vape quality is going to be concerned. I'll tell you this though, I've tried my K-Fun that I talked about the last time I was on the show on the SX, and it works a lot better than what it does on the DNA 40, and I like it on the DNA 40. I just like it that much better now on the SX Mini M Class.
So, for a second, I want to hear from Mike's Clouds. Mike's Clouds, what do you think about your temperature control devices?
Johnny Vapes writes, D looks like Mr. Rogers.
Hey, I like Mr. Rogers, man.
Welcome to the Vaporhood. Won't you be my neighbor?
This is what I think. I think that a lot of people are going to get discouraged, especially first-time users of it. And this is going to go back to Canthal. But with studies that are going on right now to see how vaping Canthal the way we have been, whether it's safe or not. If it's deemed unsafe and it's not good for you, then you're going to see everybody flock into temp control. So
there is that satisfying moment when you have that experience for the first time when you nail a nickel build and you get it wicked perfectly right, and you're vaping a tank, and then you realize because you're doing something else that your tanks run dry and you're not getting those dry hits. Like, that makes sense to me. That is the purpose of all this.
Yeah, of course that makes sense, but you got to understand, a lot of people that are going to first time use it and try to do their build, they're going to screw it up, and most likely the majority are going to get discouraged.
I agree. That's why we need improvements in the...
And they won't go back to it again, probably. That's what my thing is, that if a study comes out and it says that using Canthal is too hot and it's producing formaldehyde, everybody's going to go back to nickel, and people are going to try and attempt to learn to use it and do their builds, and it's going to be the big thing. And all these companies that are doing temperature control are going to be billionaires.
Well, what do you think, BK?
You don't want to know what I think on that one. To be honest with you, I have a feeling this study is going to come out and it's going to say just that.
What I just said.
Whether it's true or not is why I'm laughing.
You think we're the real life guinea pigs to all this stuff?
No.
What do you mean?
That's not what I think at all. It's all marketing, okay? And what we're doing, regardless of how harmful vaping on Canthal could be or may be, okay, is to an order of magnitude healthier than smoking. Even if you're sub-ohming like Big Lou all freaking day, it's still way healthier than smoking. And there's no getting around that. And I just have a strange feeling that a certain company out there that has certain connections is going to say, hey, let's make this study come out this way, Evolve. And, yeah.
I see where you're getting.
Yeah.
So basically,
it's not just that. It's the lead up to that. I've been watching Phil Basardo for years, and there's been a lot of lead up to this, even before it came out. Everybody went to China. I'm starting to hint at things that I should just keep my fucking mouth shut, but I think it's healthier.
BK hanging in a bathroom somewhere in a mysterious situation.
I highly doubt it. I have so many Freedom tools laying around here; they wouldn't make 2 feet into my house. But
we should have a Freedom Tools episode on the vape team.
Not until I move out of Connecticut. I'm not going to start advertising that shit.
Good.
But yeah. No, I just, you know what? Yes, I think that there probably are things that are created, but how harmful, how much, what's the quantity, what's the parts per million? Do we have the long-term studies to prove anything one way or another? No, we don't. How much formaldehyde is in the air we breathe? How much formaldehyde do we breathe just by walking by our car that's sitting there idling? You know, we got to keep all this stuff in perspective here.
Yeah.
I tried to turn that around the best I could.
You know, the purpose of my channel, and I know you guys care about this too, I want to bring up important topics that affect all of us, our health, our safety, also the pleasure of vaping, but at the same time, I don't want to make this a hotspot for, uneducated quotes and statements about things that we don't know enough about, but I do think that we should bring up things that are current in the news, especially as it pertains to vaping and our health. So, BK, I'd like to definitely keep this discussion going on future episodes, and we'll see if more studies come out, and also who funds the studies, where they're coming from. I mean, there's so much politics and money involved with all this stuff, and everybody has an agenda, and every study's paid by a certain organization. It's really hard to trust the information that we're being presented these days.
Well, yeah, that's just the thing. You know, there is an agenda behind everything. And, some of these agendas, could work out to be very good for all of us as vapors, okay? Whether or not someone is making money off of it, could be neither here nor there, But you have to keep that in the back of your mind. Everyone has an agenda. Everyone has a product to sell. And let's face it, if this was, charity, nobody would be in this business.
Right. Everyone wants to know also, what the hell is that beautiful fancy drink you're having tonight?
Oh, this is just a little blackberry brandy and ice.
Ooh, fancy.
Pinkies up. Connecticut.
Drink that shit.
You and Ruby need to get together.
No, we really don't.
That'd be better than hell to watch, though, man, I'll tell you.
Nothing against Ruby. I mean, she seems like a really sweet girl, but she's really not my type. Like,
well, I didn't exactly mean it that way. I think she's married, but yeah.
Yeah, well, Grim Green is probably hoping otherwise, but.
Well, one thing we want to talk about is what coil have you been... I'm not talking about the pre-coil stuff. I'm talking about the ones you built that have worked so far the best for you on the SX Mini M-Class.
Yeah. Mike, what coil do you like the most? I know you're an OCC guy, but I also know that you're you've been building on your Limo, and what's your Limo 2? What have you preferred?
The build I did today, I'm really loving right now, and I'm sure that if I do it even lower in ohms, it'll be probably better. I got a 0.1 ohm build, nickel, obviously, 6 wraps over a 3mm bit, evenly spaced, perfectly spaced, wicked beautiful, and the flavor is amazing.
Sweet.
But we'll have to see tomorrow how it's going to taste, or the next day on this build, because my other build that I had, on 2 separate builds, on the 3rd day I'd get that nasty taste from the coil, but the cotton wasn't burnt. I get like a burnt taste. So, but it's been, so far with this build, beautiful.
And you also said that you noticed a difference of your OCC coils in your new M-Class versus your DNAs, that they're performing better and they're lasting longer. Share with us about that.
I'm doing an experiment with the NI200 coils for the CASAA sub-tank, the nickel coils, and I've run that coil so far. I got the tank sitting right here. It's got the nickel in here, and 2 days so far, and they've been working perfect. So I'm going to see how long that coil lasts and see if it's working good, because on the DNA, after the 2nd day, it was no good. And plus with the DNA, you get the resistance jumping up and down, and with this you could lock the resistance. But from what I hear is that the updated version of the Vapor Sharks, the RDNAs, they have a locking too, so where you could lock the ohm reading on there, the resistance. So I don't have that device, so I'm going by what I have, which is the SX Mini, and it's been so far 2 days, perfect. We'll see how long it lasts. And I've been doing updates on it on Facebook, on my Facebook page. So that's where I'll be doing my updates on it, and maybe in a future vlog, I'll do an update, tell everybody how it's been working out with that coil, how long it lasted.
Cool. BK, you were talking before about your really low resistance build. Talk about that for a minute and how that's been working for you.
Really, like I said to you guys earlier before we were live, I'm new to this temp control thing. I mean, I've been in this for a couple days now, literally. My experiences with DNA 40 were, taking a hit of friends' mods, that happen to have a good build in them or a bad build. That was my experience. That said, I was banging my head against the wall. I was trying to figure out what the fuck I was doing wrong. So I was building it like I'd heard that you're supposed to build DNA 40. I was trying to build it around, like 0.1, 0.12, somewhere around there. And finally, I just broke down. I swallowed my manhood. I opened up the package to the SX Mini M class. I busted out the little instruction manual, and I started reading it. And they said the preferred target resistance is 0.065. So I tried to get as close to that as possible. And when I got very close to that, which is where I'm at now, I'm at like 0.057, if I remember correctly, everything just kind of fell into place.
And how did you get to that? How did you get to that resistance level? Talk about the diameter and everything on the build.
I'm running. What is that you sent me, David? 28 gauge.
28 gauge tempered. Yeah.
Okay, 28 gauge tempered NI 200. I believe it's from England, right?
Yeah.
I'm running that. I believe it's a 4-5 wrap coil, 2.5 millimeter, wide spacing. Okay, and with some fairly delicate wicking in there. It's working beautifully.
Yeah. One of the issues I've had is trying to get that because I saw the same thing when I went through my manual. I'm one of those people that likes to read the manual when I first get something. And when I read it, I'm like, holy shit, that's a low resistance. And I've had trouble with the size of the build decks that I've been working with. I want to space the coils out even more than just a little bit, so there's because the cathode or the nickel is soft to begin with, and sometimes when you pull your cotton through, it gets bunched up, and then you have to separate it. And I know that David will talk in a minute about a little technique he's been using for spacing. But for me, I want to have almost like a bigger build deck area to be able to go lower on my resistance. You know what I'm saying, guys?
Well, here's the thing. You got to get out of that DNA 40 mindset that you're in. You're not using a DNA 40, okay? Your target resistance is lower. So you don't need a big build deck because you're not building as big of a coil because your target resistance is lower.
Exactly.
Okay? So did you hear the part where I said I'm running a 4 or 5 wrap coil?
Yeah.
Spaced? That's like no wraps. You would think that the flavor would suck on that. It's phenomenal.
Yeah,
I don't know why, but it works, So just instead of trying to run a 10 or 12 wrap coil to hit your target resistance, cut that down to like 4 to 6 wraps and try to hit.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about the wraps. I was talking about more the spacing because I'm trying to go wider and wider so that it doesn't gunk up as much.
Yeah, as you can see right there, like something like that works. See that? Too. This is a 6 wrap that I had done.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's all you need. Mine are actually wider than that, but I just went with less wraps.
Yeah, I'm gonna do mine next. I'm gonna do probably do a 5 wrap next.
Yeah, I mean it's counterintuitive because from what we understand about vaping, we want more wraps, we want more surface area, for more vapor production, better flavor. But for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to matter here. I don't know, at least to me. So yeah, I mean I guess we're gaining the surface area with less wraps. I don't know because it's spread apart. I mean I seem to have about 2 millimeters in between each wrap.
David, why don't you talk for a minute? I'm sorry, BK, I didn't mean to interrupt.
You did, and that's okay. But I'll concede to David.
David.
It's all right, Brian. Brian, relax.
I'm relaxed. I'm relaxed. David, how about with your spacing technique? Why don't you talk about that? And also, why don't you talk about the the tempered nickel and what the benefits? Because I get a lot of people asking, number one, where do you buy it? Number two, why do you need that? And what makes that special?
Oh, well, the advantage to tempered nickel over conventional nickels has to do with the regular nickel is more springy. And if you're used to doing canthal and how well it holds up, I found that the tempered works a little bit better. If I want to space it, it'll space evenly. I don't have to, that last picture, the problem that you get into is that you want to, and I don't think it's any big deal anyway, is you get in these wavy kind of coils when you start trying to pull them apart. I found probably the best way to pull them apart if you want spaced coils is to initially put them together tight, and if you want them spaced, I use a razor blade. I get it in between my first and last coils, and I'll pull it apart like a spring, and then I'll kind of bend it as I would need on both sides and wherever I would need to get the proper space. And I've seen another technique that works pretty good is when people take screws and they're actually wrapping the coil on a screw and then unscrewing it off the screw because it's literally stuck on the screw when you do that. I think both methods have got their merits. I think that we'll all kind of agree this. I think if you want to avoid a hot spot, and again, a hot spot's completely different than what you're used to in canthal. Hot spot, the best way to avoid it is to space your coils. I think that we've all, before we got on air, we all were in agreement with that you need to space your coils out. I've tried from 0.08 all the way up to 0.20 and everywhere in between. Like I said, I did about a half a dozen, 8, 10. I didn't want to count because I was starting to get aggravated a little bit. As far as the lower ohm coils are concerned, I think the problem that kind of threw me off today is I was having connectivity issues with the LEMO 2. Apparently you guys weren't having that same issue, and that was throwing me off. So I was trying it on my DNA 40, and I was also trying it on the SX Mini M class. But I would probably tend to agree that the lower resistance, I think I've had the most amount of luck. I also was trying that canthal and nickel mix, and that's actually, until I had any issue with it, it was working perfectly fine. And the issue I thought was, oh my God, this coil's not going to exactly work on this build, or at least on this board. And I don't think that was the issue. I think the thing is that I had the issue with is where the positive from the addy and the positive from the base are making that connection, and that connection kind of got thrown off.
David, real quick, somebody had commented. I didn't want to skip over this. It said Joshua Sal said, I've read that tempered nickel is annealed after you hit that shit once. Does that ring a bell? Because it doesn't make sense to me. I'm not experienced enough with that.
We're not getting it that hot. Canthal, I guess in the good old days, what people would do, and I shouldn't say good old days, it wasn't that long ago I was doing it, I would take my coils, I would put them together, I put them in a pliers, and then I would torch them. That's annealing. You're not getting it that hot. So no, that's not true. The hottest that this coil should get is whatever you got temperature set at, plus or minus a few degrees. So it's not hot enough for it to be annealed.
Okay, thanks. So I guess with the IPv4 coming out, and I'm sure every other company, I would imagine that eLeaf is going to have a temperature control device. They're probably working on like the iStick Temp. I'm sure everybody else is working on temperature control. I think that most of us would all agree that we would like to see temperature control be possible, if it even is, or maybe the logic of the boards needs to be rewritten, and maybe they need to put a temperature sensor in a different method and be able to use Canthal for reading temperature. Is that even possible? Do you guys know? I don't.
You would need to have some sort of probe inside your addy that would be reading the temperature. And the problem is, when you heat up Canthal, it doesn't get even. It starts from the in and it goes out when you're firing it. So the problem is that part of your coil is going to be one temperature, and the inner part of it's going to be a completely hotter and different temperature to it. So I don't know how easily that's going to be possible to do. I really don't.
I'm sure that people are going to try lots of different ways to do it. Maybe there's something that we haven't even all thought of yet that's going to come out. It's exciting that I'm sure that there's all these manufacturers are working behind the scenes in labs doing the research to try to figure out the best, most marketable way to control temperature, especially with the pending FDA regulations and all the scare tactics that are going on with the media. What do you think, Mike?
I have no clue. I'm reading the comments right now.
Any interesting comments, Mike?
I'm reading the comments here. I don't know.
I think everybody in the comments wants you to hit that shit for everyone.
Yeah, probably.
Good for them.
Yeah, I'll hit that shit for you guys.
Well, you know, one thing I'm just noticing about the general tone is that we're all like down. Oh my God, temperature control is the worst thing in the world, and you know whatever. On a K fund, going back to a K fund, and I'm not an advocate of trying to push a K fund on you. You'll have a completely different experience with temperature control than you do on some other tanks. I knew that a lot of us were going to be doing the Limo 2, and so my experience has been kind of shadowed by the problem that I've had, you know, with the connectivity with my Limo 2. But when I run my K-Fun on it, it works perfectly fine. I do not have any problems. I was using that same exact coil that I mentioned before, and I think I'm kind of talking in circles about it. But today, so far, I think on the SX Mini, my favorite coil type has been a dual strand of nickel 200 30 gauge twisted. I've had good experience with that. And get it down to about 6 wraps and or less, and you're good. I haven't tried anything less than 6. It's worked.
Oh, I'm not high, Lex Luger.
I think Lex Luger's making a statement that Mike just denied, but it's questionable because Mike seems a little high tonight. I don't know.
Nah, I'm just being. Well, we got a guest. I don't feel like hogging the mic up. So, but well, he's not really a guest anymore. But you guys know what I mean. But going back to the IPv4,
yeah, my
local vape shop talked to the distributor, Asmodus they're called, I think, right? Asmodus, they're the ones that distribute. And basically, the rumor is the IPv4 since last week are here in the United States. They're actually in the docks, and the United States won't let them be released yet. They haven't been cleared yet. So, I guess.
Yeah, I was at my local vape shop today, Mike, and they said that they're going to be shipped. My local vape shop called his distributor when I was there, and he said he's shipping his to him tonight. But there is somewhat of a hold on all the IPv4s. I don't know what that means, but I hope they ship soon.
Yeah. Well, I think they're in customs. They're stuck in customs. That's what Asmodus stated.
Maybe they were trying to like smuggle blow or something into the States. Who knows?
There's probably so many ordered that customs are like, what the hell is this shit? You know?
Probably that tempered nickel wire they're trying to smuggle in.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to see how that's going to work. And if it's going to operate the same way the SX does, whether it's going to have where it can hold your resistance, because that's key, I think.
One of the other things that I wanted to talk about during this episode was battery life experiences with single 18650 batteries and temperature control. I know for me, I always have my battery charger, you know, sitting here ready to roll with fresh batteries, because when I use nickel, it's sucking my batteries. I mean, I'm getting like 2 tanks, and then my battery's dead. So, you guys experiencing that too? Mike?
Yeah, we're oh, sorry. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. 2 tanks, and that's it. 2 tanks equal 1 battery.
Right, and we're not talking about like a 10 milliliter juice capacity tank.
I'm talking about a Limo 2.
Yeah. How about you, BK? Any battery issues?
None whatsoever, but you got to remember, I vape at like 50 to 60 watts usually. So everything's in perspective.
1 pull 18650 and you're done.
No, but seriously, like I went to work today, I filled the sub-tank mini twice at work, and I got home and I vaped a little bit more, and I was still on my first battery. So for me, that's a hell of an improvement in battery life, and I was still getting a fairly hot vape. So, you know.
I'm getting angry right now, and the reason for this is today, I don't know if you guys lived in the real world today and were listening to the radio and watching TV, but I saw like fucking 10 different newspaper articles and on talk shows, talk radio, and they were all talking about the rising rate of fucking teen vaping. Did you guys see that shit today?
No.
No?
I try to avoid news and newspapers.
Yeah, I don't pay attention to any
I used to
stuff.
do that. I was compulsive with it and stopped.
Well, there was a huge smear campaign today that was on. It was even on the regular local news tonight. I mean, they were talking about this new study that came out that showed, teen vaping is up 3 times, and this is all going to be ammo to fuel the flames to justify, putting regulations on flavors and all that kind of stuff.
Well, they don't bring up about teens smoking cigarettes.
Oh no, they did. They said, anti-tobacco groups were so good at lowering smoking rates for all these years. It was on a decline, and it's still on a decline. But now vaping is coming back up, and it's becoming more socially normal, and it's considered safer, and it's bad for teens and things like that.
I don't think with the youth smoking cigarettes that it's going to decrease. I think that's where they begin. They're always going to be. But it's the decreases from like people like us that have quit smoking. That's where the decrease is. So, as a teen, if I had kids, teenagers, I would, and they were gonna take their choice. I mean, I wouldn't want them to do any of it, but whether it was a choice between cigarettes and vaping. So that doesn't bother me because if they're not gonna vape, they're gonna smoke cigarettes.
Right, they're gonna do something.
So why don't they promote that? It's the positives of it, which you won't hear that, which is effed up.
The thing that bugs me about all this is beyond even a health issue now. It's become like a pseudo-morality type issue, okay? They don't really give a shit whether it's better or not. It's the fact that it's potentially addictive, okay? Which is really nobody's business, okay? We should be worried about harm reduction and kids getting into something safer than smoking, because let's face it, kids are going to be kids. If they're not going to smoke, they're going to chew tobacco, and they're going to have their jaw cut off. If they're not going to do that, they're going to vape, which is probably a lot better than either one of them, So yeah, it's in my opinion, a lot of it, besides just big tobacco, big pharma, and the government losing tax dollars, I think there's definitely a subset that, whether they realize it or not, are making some sort of a morality judgment on the whole thing.
Well, did any of you guys watch that video? I think it was up yesterday or the day before, where they were talking about that agreement that they had with the tobacco companies, and they were selling bonds.
Yep.
Yes.
Can you believe that?
Yep.
Yeah, if you guys haven't checked out that video, we will. I'll put a link once this video goes into the replay. I'll put a link in the description so you guys can click on it. It's more about California, but it really does impact the whole country, and a lot of the data makes sense to all of us.
When I was searching, though, that's not the only state that's doing the same thing. I think the reason California is so affected by it is because there's such a large population. The agreement was done about population, number of people in your state. So the large states, they're going to be pushing for vaping bad, tobacco. We'll just push it under the rug. We won't talk about it, but we'll just go ahead and make it impossible for people to vape.
Well, the thing that we all need to just put it out there and know that it's a fact is that the federal government and the state government do not, and we all know this, and I'm not saying anything that everyone doesn't know, they don't care about our health. It's never been about our health. It's not going to be about our health. It's not about our health when it comes to energy regulations. It's not about our health when it comes to food and agriculture. It's about the green. It's about the money, and that is the motivation. So we need to have a voice and stand up and threaten the money. How do we threaten the money?
By cutting the head off the snake.
Yep.
And that comes to voting.
Which is basically, you vote against vaping, you don't get my vote. That's it.
We bring up a good point about whether or not they're going to be voting about vaping one way or another. I don't know how many politicians it's going to come up and who's going to have. The news media has to ask them those questions.
They're not going to.
They're not. That's why we have to be the ones to email them and write them letters to let them know. And the more they get, the more they're going to think twice of even banning it or screwing with vaping.
I got to be honest, we
they
have to go a little bit further than that, okay? I think, all this is well and good, but I think we need to educate people. We need to find out which politicians are the ones that are against it and which ones aren't against it. And
Well,
put it out there.
I think that Obama, as soon as he leaves the White House, is going to be a fucking hardcore vapor, and I completely agree with Charles.
I highly doubt it.
Yo, he smoked. What did Obama smoke? He smoked something. I love those pictures of him smoking cigarettes.
He smokes Newport 100s.
Is it?
Yeah.
And I think he's hitting the Segali right now. I think Obama's rocking the Segali. Looks like a .2 build that Big Lou built him. Super sub-1 build.
I'll put it to you this way. The people that are trying to legalize pot right now are the same people that are trying to make vaping illegal, which I find quite ironic.
Well, difference with marijuana. I'm not that we're talking about marijuana. It's a completely different source. You're not competing against tobacco. You're not. There's very few people. In fact, there's probably as many people that are smoking pot than there are cigarettes, and vice versa. I don't think there's necessarily a correlation there one way or another. So I don't think that's been such a big thing. And then, gosh, the amount of taxes that those people can charge. I mean, that's considered the ultimate sin.
Well,
and
no, that's the answer right there, is because by switching to vaping, we're eliminating a tax base for them, okay? They're generating a new tax base with marijuana legalization, okay? So you need to ask yourself this question: which party loves to raise taxes?
I think when it really comes down to it, they all do. They just do it in different ways.
True, but, are we ever going to get a libertarian in there?
That'd be something. I know one thing never to talk about on YouTube or anywhere in public, friends, heck, even your family, is politicians, religion, and a few other things.
We need to get a vaportarian in there. That's what we need.
Vaportarian, there we go.
Well, it's
Mike Bates, the first vaportarian.
It's an ugly thing to talk about, and nobody wants to talk about the elephant in the room. That's what the politics of this comes down to. Nobody wants to discuss the elephant in the room, and until we can openly discuss it and educate ourselves about what's
now. When you say the elephant in the room, do you mean the Republican Party, or?
I mean, who is really actively against this? If you research the politics of this, there is one party that is against vaping heavily.
The Democrats.
There's one party that isn't against vaping nearly as heavily.
And who might that be?
That's simple. The Republicans are not against vaping as heavily as the Democrats, by a ratio of probably 85 to 15. Okay, I mean, it's a huge spread. Dude, I'm like a freaking hippie. Okay, but this is the reality of the situation. It is what it is. Barack Obama isn't going to freaking help you with vaping, folks. Sorry. Neither are the same people that are trying to legalize pot. It ain't going to happen.
Just wants big tobacco's money, that's all. So he can spend more.
Well, we've talked about a lot. We've talked about vaping. We've talked about politics. And I'm about to start a separate channel on religion soon. But I would like to thank BK. I'd like to thank Mikey Vapes. I would like to thank you, David, for joining us. We've run out of time yet again here on the Vape Team. Thank you to all of our live. We have the most people watching live tonight than we've had in the history of the show, which has been a whole 5 episodes now. And we're going to have more interesting content. We got giveaways. We're going to have a whole bunch of stuff coming up soon, guys, so stay tuned to this. I'd like to say thank you and give you my goodbyes, and I'm going to put it off onto BK right now, and he can tell you good night, good evening, and good luck.
Cheers, friends. That's it.
David?
Well, I really appreciate you having me on the show. I wish to God it wasn't such a downbeat sort of thing with temperature control. I mean, I wanted everybody to be upbeat and happy, and hey, this is the thing, and so I'm sorry that wasn't the case. This SX Mini, though, it's fantastic. I strongly recommend that you get it, and as I think later when we come to find better builds, I'm certain we're going to be brainstorming with one another, and we'll share those, and I'm certain that you all have videos sharing that information. I appreciate you having me on.
Mike Vapes, the president. Anyway, thank you everybody for joining us, and remember, hashtag hit that shit. And I'm hitting that for all of you.
Give us another snap.